Morning and welcome back to the NRG Team at 10K in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm Joe Izzet, hosting for Nerd Rage Gaming, and we have got Legacy, Modern, and Pioneer semifinals and finals finishing up from yesterday. If you were with us before, thanks for coming back around. We've got the team event for 2 rounds this morning, and then we'll pick up the Modern 5K, which starts in an hour and will go all day long. Full house, 120 teams yesterday for the team event. 300 player cap today for Modern. So plenty of magic. Players came out. The Midwest represented. Thanks for showing up to watch. Everyone that's in the building to play, hopefully having a good time. Judges are ready. The booth is ready. The staff is ready. Drake Sasser's here. He's ready. Let's go ahead and bring him in.
Absolutely, Joe. I am fired up this morning.
All right. Good morning. You're back in action. Sticking around. Now you're gonna be with us for a while today. We just had a brief preview of Drake's awesome memes, personality, strategy, everything he had yesterday. Today he's gonna be with us for a good chunk of the day. Drake, thanks for being here. The players are ready. We have a bracket. Let's top 4 teams have made it this far. Let's go ahead and show you who they are. You can see here the number 1 overall seeds: Andrew Elenbogen, Max McVety, and Clay Spicklemire. They're going to be facing. We're going to be watching the Muhlbach and the Carlson brothers versus Elenbogen's team. That's what we're going to watch. We're going to start with Legacy. We have Jesse Robkin, Zoe Riederman, and Zach Allen made it through as the 6th seed versus Daniels, Silverberg, and Covalenti. We'll get to them when we have time. But first, the players are waiting for us. Let's go ahead and go to the number 1 versus number 4 seeds and kick this day off. So you can see the names and the archetypes there on the screen. Izzet Delver versus Burn in Legacy is where we're going to begin.
Beautiful. This is another classic matchup in the Legacy format. Burn been a deck for a long time, and as has Delver. So I imagine both of these players have played this matchup plenty of times. Clay here on the right, leading off with a Volcanic Island into a Delver of Secrets. One of the better starts in the Burn matchup. You really need to get some pressure out early if you hope to race the aggressive starts the Burn deck can have.
Right. Let's go ahead and get this overlay straightened up. It is reversed right now. Apologies for that. And a Goblin Guy comes in for Nick.
We're considering a
Classic
daze. I
start.
like this daze a lot with no removal spell for sure. You need to
Yeah.
really, like I said, it's all about a race here. And the Burn deck, I promise, is a lot better at being aggressive. So Delver, in general, I think a little behind when racing. Looks like an upkeep draw is going to happen before the Delver trigger. The Delver trigger finds a land and is not going to be able to flip off that, as here comes a Ponder.
Yeah, Ponder nice, guaranteeing the Delver flip next turn, hopefully for Spicklemire's sake. He certainly knows the ins and outs of the matchups. As we heard Andrew say yesterday when we interviewed him, that Clay plays Delver basically exclusively in Legacy, so he really should know what's going on here. Versus Burn, really one thing that he's going to need to manage are non-basic lands in play, as Price of Progress is a card that can do a lot or it can do very little, depending on how Clay plays into it.
Yeah, when you talk about the things that you actually have agency over in this matchup, right? Because there's a lot of starts Burn can have where they just have a flurry of burn spells and you just die to that. And there's not a lot you can do about it. But the things that you can control, things like, like you said, managing how many lands you put into play. If you're going to put a lot of lands into play, you need to do tricks like put a wasteland into play to threaten to wasteland yourself. These are the kinds of edges that you can give yourself in a matchup that can feel hopeless in some certain spots. And here is a Brainstorm as Delver is now dead. Searing Blaze, a really, really good play out of Nick. Being able to manage the threat and get some burn points across is going to matter a lot as we see if Clay can find another threat to continue to race here.
Yeah, and really, I mean, the more turns, like, we know what Nick Carlson is going to draw. He's going to draw burn spells. So Clay needs to get this game going. There's only so many things he can realistically counter. He did get away with the 1 days early, but probably, I mean, we see a Force Will in his hand. And it's probably going to be Force or Bust. Now, here's like something like a Lava Spike. I mean, that's great and all. The first one seems kind of anemic, doesn't do much, but the 5th, 6th one, well, that ends the game.
That's lethal. Absolutely. We see a Force Will in the hand. If I'm Clay, I think I really want to fire this off pretty aggressively. You can see a Murktide there pulled all the way to the left. That is a huge pickup for the Delver deck in this matchup when you compare how it is stacked up across the years that Legacy has been a format. The Burn deck traditionally is kind of considered to be a little ahead in the matchup, but with these big threats that the Delver deck got out of the Modern Horizons 2 format, like Murktide Regent, they can close the game a lot faster than they could previously. And Murktide Regent, obviously a very impressive blocker, hard to burn spell down, like we saw the Delver of Secrets get taken care of. So, like I said, I think Clay is really sitting here thinking about Force of Willing, whereas he might want to save it for something like a Fire Blast or a big spell, just because, it really helps get a Murktide Regent out and make it very big to close the game fast. So I think we're seeing a little bit of combat math being done here by Clay Spicklemire.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I definitely agree with you there. It is nice to be able to just kind of play even, and then save your Force of Will for the Fire Blast at the end. So the burn players all in, they sack their lands, you counter the Fire Blast, and then it's over. But as you suggested, Clay does, after some thought, take out the Goblin Guide here, pitching Expressive Iteration, so keeping Murktide Brainstorm.
Yeah, I like this
Expressive
play a
Iteration
lot.
often leads to a third land drop, so that might be in vein of playing around Price of Progress. That might be the reason why that is less valuable in this case to him than the actual Brainstorm itself.
Right. And we did see a draw there. Clay had brainstormed, elected not to fetch away the cards. Looks like he picked up the second copy of Expressive Iteration, maybe floated the second one in case he needed to force. So heads up play by Clay there. Going to go ahead and brainstorm, be able to grab a Volcanic Island, kept the basic island in hand so we can go ahead and get another spell in the yard before we cast our Murktide Regent, hoping to delve out for the largest possible. We can see him very quickly play that land, and looks like we're going to see 5 spells pretty quickly pulled to the front.
I would think, this is definitely not one where Clay wants to waste any time. I suppose clockwise, 7 versus 8 is effectively the same, but maybe Nick will use multiple fetch lands, or as he is just on Eidolon, maybe Eidolon will force him to take some damage on his own, so the 8 power will actually matter.
Well, neat trick here, Joe, is with that 8/8 Murktide Regent, right? So Nick's at 19. If Clay finds a 4th land as a fetch land, he can fetch a Mystic Sanctuary, pull a spell out of his graveyard, and then suddenly it's a 9/9. And then if Nick ever cracks that fetch, he's dead immediately. So there's a little bit of a trick we can make to pump the clock up just enough to be relevant. But this Eidolon could still be pretty annoying in the face of a Murktide Regent with Clay all the way down to 8.
Yeah, so Clay with a Daze in the hand here is actually considering dazing here just to force Nick to break the fetch land and actually go to 18, so that a fetch land off the top for the Sanctuary would actually increase the size and maybe increase the clock. Now, that wouldn't actually turn on right away because it does reduce Clay's land count in play. But yeah, we can see here Nick dropping to 18 off of that Arid Mesa.
Well, the Eidolon itself is going to do some amount of work, right? Because Nick needs to cast another spell at least in order to win this race. And so if he does, then as we can see, Clay also gets to pick up one of the non-basics. Now a Price of Progress is only a shock. And, that could win the race for Clay. So maybe, Clay kind of trying to get Nick locked under his own Eidolon as we see a crunch across for 2, putting Clay down to a pretty precarious 6. But Murktide Regent doing a good job racing here. Daze not going to add a lot to the mix, though.
Yeah, and in fact, at this point, I think Nick is locked out, like you're saying, of perhaps any non-Fire Blast spell. Fire Blast looks like it would win the game.
Yeah, Fire Blast is the card here. Do we have it? It looks like we do not. Clay,
there's no reason to hold back on that here.
Yeah, Clay kind of thinking about what is it that wins? Nothing. Okay, here you go, bonk. And we see Murktide Regent very aggressively take down game 1 here. Like I said, like Murktide Regent, you really got to see the power that card has in the matchup in 2022 Magic, right? Like Legacy, has taken a lot of shapes and sizes. Even if the archetypes have remained fairly constant, there's a lot of churn with what cards are being played. And Murktide Regent was a huge pickup in this matchup, and we got to see why right there. Very, very exemplary case study there.
Yeah. All right. We're going to switch over to Modern for the other Carlson versus Andrew Elenbogen. This 4-color mirror. We anticipated that this match would probably draw out, take some time, although it looks like Andrew with 2 Planeswalkers to 0 for Matt Carlson.
Is that a red emblem?
Oh, yeah. Okay, well,
right. This game doesn't look long for this world.
No, it does not. Renin 6 Ultimate allows Andrew to utilize all his instances of sorceries in the graveyard now have retrace. So at the cost of discarding a land, he can recast everything. And this isn't flashback. These spells don't get exiled when you use them. So he can.
We can just keep doing this with an expressive iteration in hand. That's an expressive iteration basically every turn for the rest of the game. That seems pretty powerful to me, Joe.
Yes, indeed. And with the Time Reveler protecting, Andrew can do anything he wants. on his turn, on Matt's turn, and if you're on Matt's side, I don't know that there's a real plan you can formulate to fight against a Red and 6 ultimate.
Yeah, Joe, I think I'm under the impression that because these rounds are untimed, I think Matt here is more or less just trying to get more information. I can't imagine that Matt is sitting there very confident about his position in this particular game, given that Andrew seems to be more or less just having all of the fun. Omnath triggers flying around, retrace available, let's make some mana, why not? All kinds of stuff going on for Andrew. I think more or less Matt just kind of fishing for some information here.
Yeah, and from Matt's perspective, like Andrew could flood on spells, so he can't retrace anything. But that's not really much to hope for either.
That doesn't seem like something that you should be wishing for. If
No.
I had to take a guess, let's see what Matt is trying to cast here. A solitude in order to take care of the Omnath. We'll see how Andrew wants to respond to that, if at all. Not particularly interested. I'll gain 4 life. Thank you.
All right. Small victories here for Matt Carlson. Does get the Omnath off the board. Andrew flush with cards. Plus a solid graveyard there. Yeah, lightning bolt in hand. I mean, that's just.
Yeah, I think we're at the. Yeah, let's just lightning bolt everything for the rest of the game. You don't get to
Sure.
keep a creature. Let's do this. We'll pick up another fetch land. All right. Is it time to begin the expressive iteration chain? Let's find out. Oh, maybe we're besiegeing some lands? We are. Are we going to try to run Matt out of lands? The hard Armageddon plan?
I mean, that's a lot. That's a lightning bolt right there. So Andrew just lightning bolt to the land, basically, as that Boseiju could be a bolt. Instead, it turns the Triome into
that's one of the new Triomes here.
Yeah. All right. So this game may take a few minutes, but it is definitely over. So let's go ahead and go back to Legacy and see how that plays out.
A little bit of shuffling up here. Some pretty quick games. I suspect this entire match could reasonably be over before that modern game 1 is finished.
Yeah.
So we're going to see a lot of spells flying a lot faster here than previously. I imagine Nick choosing to elect to play as both players are looking at what appears to be their first 7-card hand. Is that a counterbalance in Clay's hand? What's going on with that, Joe?
I have no idea. Let me consult the deck list here as who in their right mind plays counterbalance these days. Yeah, there is a single counterbalance in the 75. Wow, I don't know what to say about that.
It's probably pretty good here. If I had to guess on it.
After the Divining Top banning, there were people, including Nerd Rage contributor Anurag Das, who tried to make counterbalance continue to exist, and I was just over it instantaneously. Like, this is just not going to work. What are you going to play? Sustain and try and draw a bunch of brainstorms? No, thank you.
Just use your brainstorms. I mean, okay. Talking about it seriously, if it counters 1 spell, is it worth its weight?
Yes.
Okay. I think there's a reasonable chance across the game that it would counter at least 1 spell in this matchup. And maybe there's spots in like the Delvermere and stuff, it'll hit at least 1 spell. So,
yeah.
Maybe the card's like a little more reasonable to give it credit for, even if it's not the oppressive lock it was during the top Miracles days.
No, and your problem is your top end is all wrong on mana curve. Like, Terminus could flip and get Fire Blast. Murktide, what are you doing for me? Nothing.
Yeah, Murktide Regent probably not countering a whole lot of spells in the Legacy format.
This is just, I don't know. We'll see. If it gets 2 spells, obviously it'll be probably a game winner. But
that reminds me, how's the checklist looking, Joe? How are we doing on that?
I'll tell you what. Much as I hate to admit it, you called 6 new Capenna cards showing up. There were 6.
I'm so talented. Wow, I'm incredible. Honestly, Nerd Rage Gaming has the best commentary crew. I tell you what, just incredible stuff. So here's a turn 1 Goblin Guide. No Force of Will for that one. Gonna reveal a Murktide. That's a good one, but no card advantage for Clay Spicklemire. Excuse me, as Clay Spicklemire is going to take his 2 damage on the nose. Draw. Looks like a Scalding Tarn passing of the turn, electing not to play the Ponder or the Dragon's Rage Chandler, looking to maybe get a little bit of information off this Scalding Tarn and then get a little Lightning Bolt action on this Goblin Guide.
Yeah, I want to see this counterbalance get played, and then Goblin Guide attack, reveal the top card every single turn, so Nick can play around it.
You don't like letting the reveal happen before the bolt there, Joe?
All right, so Yeah, 2 attackers here, so obviously we saw a bolt from Spicklemire, but damage is gonna continue coming through.
Yeah, these early creature draws, some of the better ones on the play for the burn deck. We see sometimes they cut some creatures and stuff on the draw. Definitely
Mhm.
not on the play. These are the most powerful starts you see from the burn deck. As here comes both creatures holding up that extra land. We saw a fetch pretty aggressively, and then no further plays. Does suggest potentially some combat tricks to give that monster Swift Spear a prowess trigger. Looks
Yep.
like Clay is considering something with the Goblin Guide trigger on the stack.
Yeah, well, he's a silent creature. I mean, imagine if he bolts the Swift Spear and Nick has Bolt Fire Blast in hand to preserve it. I mean, that's putting your setting yourself specs at 0 land on turn 2 is a cost, but that would be a pretty fantastic way to get this game really accelerated.
Seven, let's see, 7, 10, 12. That would put Clay to 5. Not quite dead on board, but pretty
No.
powerful. Mishra's Bobble, not the 0 CMC card you want on top when there's a Goblin Guide trigger, but can't be that bad. Here's a Lightning Bolt on the Goblin Guide. Monster Swift Spear looks like it's going to get through cleanly, and there is a Lightning Bolt before damage. That'll be 5 total damage, bringing Clay down to 12 as he draws
So
a
that's already
Mishra's
that's
Bobble.
pretty good work for 2 turns here. Murktide at the ready, but the graveyard not cooperating just yet.
Looks like Dragon's Rage Channeler with a Bobble follow-up could do a little bit of work in order to make that happen. Going to keep that one on top. Clay likes that one. So probably we're going to see if he's going to cast the Ponder, use another Surveil trigger here. All right. Going to
And a
leave it on
basic
top
island
again.
again, which is nice for Clay. I don't know how you feel about Price of Progress after boarding against like Clay Spicklemire, an experienced player. Nick Carlson knows he's not going to get a bunch of free damage off of Price of Progress. You think that's something that gets boarded out?
Potentially. I can certainly see shaving some numbers if you're
Yeah.
sitting on 4 in the main deck. I don't think it's ever a card you want to draw 2 of. I can see shaving a couple copies, but depending on how many cards you have in the sideboard for this matchup, like I said, a lot of times I think burn players estimate that this matchup is at least slightly in their favor. And maybe not so much now with Murktide Regents, and maybe you need to bring in Pyroblast or something to handle Murktide Regent, because like I said, it really does swing the matchup a lot. We saw that happen really in game 1. We'll see maybe potentially happen again here in game 2, as we do see one in Clay Spickemire's hand. So it depends on how Burn is approaching the matchup in 2022. A lot of my knowledge on the Burn approach to the Delver matchup, I think, is pretty outdated, but I definitely think I would be interested in reaching for Price of Progresses before a lot of the other cards in the burn deck when sideboarding.
So another thing about talking about outdated, there's a main deck Sulfuric Vortex in Nick Carlson's deck. That's not a card I feel like we've seen the last several years much of, at least in the starting 60.
Oh yeah, definitely not. Typically, yeah, like you said, that you want that like in a lot grindier spots. Things like that we see. Here the 3-mana spell, pretty hard to cast a lot of times in the burn deck. You're shaving a lot on lands in order to make sure that you have that appropriate density of burn spells to finish your opponent off. But in some grindier matchups, we see some of the Jeskai control decks and the blue-white based control decks in the legacy format. This card's really, really powerful. It shuts off all the swords to plowshare shenanigans, any other ways to gain life, while giving you a nice, consistent stream of damage every single turn. A classic. It maybe speaks to the type of metagame Nick was expecting in this format, maybe a little bit higher density of fair decks than you would see in a more evenly distributed metagame.
All right, so this Dragon Rage Channeler, which was a 3/3 on defense there as it was summoning sick, actually holds back the Swift Spear for the turn, so that's nice for Clay, preserving the life total, just stopping the attacks, and then likely with the Murktide follow-up here. Now, it's not going to be the biggest Murktide ever, but 5/5 is still big enough to stop
Yeah, still big enough
pretty
to
much
threaten the play.
anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where you see Clay preserving the artifact type there in the yard, going to go ahead and tap the 3rd land. That way, Dragon's Age Channeler more likely to come back online a little bit faster. Artifact, one of the harder types to get into, into the graveyard. With Clay having an expressive iteration in order to really kind of facilitate that Surveil trigger churn in order to turn that back online next turn, as well as a Force of Will backup. Clay kind of in a pretty good spot, sitting at a pretty healthy 11. It's always nice to be in double digits going into the burn player's turn 4. And, Eidolon, once again, we might see a situation that we saw in game 1 where Murktide Regent offers so much damage that the burn player ends up kind of locked under their own Eidolon, as we see a Searing Blaze. It looks like targeting the Murktide Regent. Eidolon trigger going to go ahead and bonk Nick for 2 there.
Yeah, this is maybe there's a follow burn spell, or maybe this is just to set up an attack here for Nick Carlson.
Well, if there's a follow-up burn spell to finish the Murktide off, I mean, the 2 prowess triggers do a little bit to rebuy, some of the damage you're losing by trying to kill this Murktide Regent. And then the Eidolon is offering up a lot more power like with respect to burn damage, because once again, Clay is behind in the race.
Right.
And
I mean,
the Dragon's Reach Channeler now shrunk to a 1/1. Turning it back on is going to cost a lot of life, and that'll definitely swing the tide in Nick's favor, even if he's using multiple spells to take off this Murktide Regent.
right. And he's just going to put Clay to the test. He's just going to attack into this Murktide that has 3 damage on it here and ask, hey, do you want to trade this off for one of my creatures? Nice play here, really putting the pressure on Clay. And I don't know that there's a comfortable answer to this situation.
Oh, yeah. I like this stack a lot. I feel like a lot of players, you can see the lightning bolt flicking around in Nick's hand. A lot of players would fire off this lightning bolt targeting this Murktide Regent, just kind of not thinking about it. Just like, all right, my plan is to finish this off. I already got a little bit of damage in with the Searing Blaze. Let's just go ahead and finish off the Murktide Regent and get my punch in for 5 or whatever. But now, Nick kind of in the spot where it's like, okay, like, I'm going to trade either of my creatures. I think they're not going to be worth more damage than these burn spells across future turns. If you want to trade it for this Eidolon, that's absolutely fine. Mm-hmm. And then here comes a crashing in Monastery Swiftspear. That lightning bolt still in hand for Nick. Very, very patient, and really shows that, like, okay, I understand and I respect that this lightning bolt may need to be a little bit more flexible. There's a chance that this Dragon's Rage Channeler is going to offer up, some damage, or you're going to find some sequence of other threats to where I need to start focusing on your threats again and then start beating you up with prowess triggers, but I don't know yet. And so waiting on this bolt, using that information, very, very heads up by Nick, and not a play I think a lot of burn players would make.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So iteration here for Clay, trying to rebuild, but having to be careful, as at the moment he probably doesn't. Oh, well, okay, that'll change things, but he doesn't necessarily want Delirium during his main phase here. Lightning Bolt, however, will make that tolerable as picking off the Swift Spirit and then an attack. Yeah, okay, there's a Swift Spirit going down. So now Dragon's Channeler back to being a 3/3 and ready to go. But we know there's a Bolt in Nick's hand, and there's no 2 damage burn spells here. So any 2 spells for Nick will bring us to game 3.
Yeah, it looks like there's at least Lightning Bolt among the mix, maybe Rift Bolt and Eidolon of the Great Revel, the rest of the composition of his hand. And I like the waiting on the Lightning Bolt. Clay, I believe, down to 6 here. A second Lightning Bolt obviously finishes him off. Rift Bolt plus Lightning Bolt, going to get the job done. We do know Clay has a Force of Will in hand. But, once again, with the Murktide Regent gone, the clock may just not be fast enough. As here comes an Eidolon of the Great Revel. We're going to see how Clay responds to that. We do know Clay has a second copy of Lightning Bolt, that Expressive Iteration finding 2. Like I said, when you're in a racing situation, an Expressive Iteration being able to find 2 Lightning Bolts does a lot to swing a race in your favor.
Yeah, we'll see. The choice of, wow, so suspend here for Nick, holding up the Lightning Bolt. So Clay will have access to all his... He really can cast 2 spells. If the Lightning Bolt had been fired off first, that would have limited Clay to just 1 more spell and might have actually brought out the Force of Will. As it is, the attack comes across here. 6-6, both players crimped by this Eidolon. But as we know,
Murktide Regent follow-up. Yeah. Just make sure we get the job done, something big enough. There is a 6-6 that threatens to be lethal on its own. Clay with a Force of Will and a Lightning Bolt in hand, but there's a little bit of weirdness going on here where we have a Rift Bolt trigger. All right, I'm going to go to 4. That'll put you to 3. If I cast Lightning Bolt, which we know he has in hand, I didn't get a good look at the second card. Looks like a Searing Blood, which does also threaten to be lethal. Lightning Bolt, target you. That one can't happen.
Right.
As Nick goes down to 4.
So Nick
Clay can force this, but can he Lightning Bolt afterwards? Lightning Bolt Nick for lethal? Lightning Bolts you in response. Eidolon trigger on the stack. If we resolve Eidolon trigger, then Searing Blood.
Yeah, and that's it. Okay. So the Eidolon will...
What a weird game. Eidolon kind of being the decider there between the 2 players. And
yeah, that Eidolon cost Nick the ability to play the last spell in hand, and we'll give the legacy match to the Elenbogen McVety Spicklemire team. Well played there. That was tricky to navigate when it gets down towards the end there.
Yeah, that was really cool and well navigated by Clay. I mean, we saw a lot of really heads up decision making. Like I said, I'm sure Clay has played this matchup plenty of times across the ages, and obviously, has played against it since. He, obviously clearly navigated his spells well, recognized the power of Murktide in this matchup, and utilized the spells in even some card disadvantageous ways in order to aggressively get the Murktide regions out. And then those, even with Nick being able to answer them, proved to be too much, and we're able to finish off Nick in the legacy seat.
All right, so let's go back to Modern. Elenbogen did win the game with the Ren 6 Ultimate. No shock there. So we're in game 2 now. Matt Carlson trying to even things up. His Pioneer teammate, Nate Muhlbach, did take the first game against Max McVety. So the match still very much in play with Spicklemire having one legacy to put themselves certainly ahead.
All right. Well, we're going to see a little bit of a Ren and 6 battle here.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of more or less seems to be the way that the modern format is going. A lot of these 4-color, elemental style decks, blink style decks. A little bit of argument on exactly how to build these decks, but either way, the powerful cards have proven themselves to be powerful. Ren and 6 certainly among them, as here's a Teferi Time Raveler follow-up. Battle of the Planeswalkers, a good spot to be if you're in a fair mirror like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ren. I mean, how good is Ren in 6? I mean, this card is incredible for 2 mana. I feel like, we had our first 2 mana Planeswalker with Tybalt, and that was kind of a joke.
Correct.
Drake Sasser, Ren 6 is not a joke.
Not a joke. No, sir. Banned in Legacy at this point in time. I've heard arguments for being banned in Modern, but certainly not banned at the moment. Seems to gain some stock with each new set. Picking up cards like Urza Saga seems to increase the stock a little bit of this card. Also, just enabling these 4-color mana bases, because you can pick up a fetch land every single turn, fetch some Triumphs, fetch Shocklands, and make your 4-color mana bases work while maintaining that card advantage. There's a lot of people that say the 4-color decks flood a lot, whereas the actual reality is they just draw so many extra cards, but a lot of them are land through to Ren and 6 that it feels like you're flooding, even though they're actually just cards that you're up. And Ren and 6, really, that's where you see that power. It's not necessarily obvious, I think, to every single player at first, but to those veterans of the game that know the power of fetch lands, know the power of wastelands, and have seen that happen in Legacy, Ren and 6, obviously a very, very, very powerful card. 2-mana Crucible of Worlds seems to be maybe a little bit too far in the power direction when looking at a Crucible effect.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, you're speaking of the card gaining power as new lands are printed. Yeah, the channel land cycle from Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty really made a difference as well. So here is Oath of Nissa to break the symmetry.
Keep in mind, Matt is on an Elementals build. We see Risen Reef among the bunch. Now, we do know Andrew is eschewing that package in his build today. I'm not necessarily positive how they line up with the asymmetry, but I imagine Risen Reef seems like a card that draws a lot of cards. And so I think, offsetting a lot of the card disadvantage from the Evoke Elementals, as well as picking up things like Cavern of Souls for your creatures to be uncounterable, could matter a lot in these fair setups like we're seeing here. Now, both players, it really looks like a mirror match on the table right now with both players having Teferi and Ren and 6 running. But these cards like Oath of Nissa and Risen Reef that Matt has access to pick up with Teferi Time Raveler could make a big difference here.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, Risen Reef does not reveal land. Looks like an abundant growth, so sort of a land. And the Ren and 6 race to ultimate will actually potentially broken here somewhat, as Andrew is going to need to deal with this Risen Reef somehow. The easiest way is to Ren and 6 and pick it off. He is behind in the race, so that's probably not too big of a cost. If he was ahead in the Ren and 6 loyalty race, that might be a different story.
Yeah, you mentioned the Ren and 6 ultimate race. I really think it kind of looks a little silly to run your 3-mana card into an onboard Ren and 6, but the card once again did replace itself. We saw an abundant growth picked up. No ramping actually being done there, but it, like you said, it keeps Matt ahead in the race to an ultimate, and we saw that's exactly how Andrew Elenbogen won game 1 in this matchup. Is that Ren and 6 ultimate being able to retrace spells, for the rest of the game. And, Matt potentially threatening to do that here in this game. That's clearly what matters. The Risen Reef stuff might be a little too small ball based on how the game's developed. And that one loyalty that we see, actually 2 loyalty, because Andrew doesn't get to plus up this turn, is going to matter a lot here, as here's a fetch and shock. Secret Foundry.
Now, there are other ways to deal with the loyalty in these Planeswalkers. Obviously, it could be attacked, although I'm not sure it's going to be very easy to keep a creature in play here. But Fury can take a real chunk out of a Planeswalker's loyalty.
Maybe a little
And here we're
Omnath.
gonna
Oh, so
see
Kenzen, the channel
sure.
lands you were
Yeah.
mentioning previously. We've really seen that card in combination with Ren and 6. I think more than most as far as a maybe alternate win condition for these 4
Mhm.
color decks. Being able to just make 2 tokens every single turn really upgrades the plus ability of Ren and 6. And of course, they do have haste. They can threaten to swing the Planeswalker race here a little bit instantaneously, as they seem to attack Teferi Time Raveler, as that card can start to bounce the tokens and maybe alleviate some of the pressure there.
Mhm. So the ability to rebuy the tokens on next turn perhaps leads Andrew to not bother with the Ren 6 immediately, although a Fury drawn for Matt Carlson means he can actually pick off the Ren 6 here if he chooses.
Yeah, and we know it's going to be unchecked. Teferi Time Raveler in play for both
Mhm.
players does mean that there will be no on the stack shenanigans at all for either player.
Yeah.
This is going to be all sorcery speed. Just play your cards when on your main phases that we're going to see here. And like you said, Fury, a good option here. Being able to pick off Ren and 6 does break the asymmetry as far as card advantage. That does matter a lot. Now, cards like Omnath that make a card and make a lot of mana can swing that in the other direction. My understanding is in these 4 color matchups, Omnath is among the most powerful cards that you can possibly play. As all your cards are 2-for-1s, you just need the mana to cast them all in order to get ahead.
Mm-hmm. All
As
right.
Ren and
So
6
Ren
is
and
going to be
6
picked off with Fury.
down, and okay. I'm sorry. Well, Ren 6, Andrew's Ren 6 is out of commission. Matt's takes down to kill off a token there.
Are we going to downtick to Fairy to pick off the other token?
No, looks
Looks
like it's
like no,
going
we're just going to
up.
plus that up and pass the turn
Yeah.
back. 1 token, not checked by the Fury, not a problem. Don't need to cash in the card quite yet. This is Andrew Elenbogen's 5th mana source, so we could see a Fury of Andrew's here, but I think the red card in hand is a Lightning Bolt, so not quite good enough to take off some Planeswalkers. Instead, going to go after the Fury.
All right, so now this token has a choice of Planeswalkers to attack. Matt Carlson's life total being 14. I don't think there's any reality where Andrew actually attacks to the face. Unless maybe he has an Omnath that he knows he can trigger level 3 to catch up on the Planeswalkers. But no, yeah. 1 down
Not a
on
chance.
Teferi. And we'll continue on with just a cantrip.
Cycle the dress down real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Pick up that dress down. Oh, look at all these tricks. I'm going to go ahead and draw all these cards. Cantrip, cantrip. Here's an abundant growth. Going to move a bunch of cards around, draw a bunch of cards, see if we can find some Furies. No Furies to be found here.
All right. So Matt untaps here. And this game could take a while. Pioneers getting going on game 3. My instinct would be to stay here, but chat's instinct seems to disagree. They want to see the Pioneer, so let's go ahead and jump over there. There's a good chance the modern match is still going by the time this
Yeah, well, I
finishes
think
up.
we've not
Anyway,
seen the last
we
of the 4-color mirror
yeah
in the modern
we may
format, even
not
if it's
miss much.
asymmetrical.
We only miss a couple turns.
Move some cards around for a
Yeah.
while. We'll get back to you.
All right.
And
So
let's get to
we
the
here
Spikefield
we are.
Hazard on Elvish Mystic action.
Yeah. Okay. So the mono green deck we saw a little bit of yesterday. We also saw Winota. Both decks use elves just to ramp into more powerful things. So keeping the board clear, obviously, to Max's advantage. Oath of Nissa on the board here. I mean, that's still a devotion pip for what will eventually be, I'm sure, a Nykthos, but no real relevance now. And a pair of Sokenson sagas here. Barrel down Sokenson, is that the name of the card? No, that's an old card, isn't it?
No, I don't think that's the name of the card.
No, it's not. That's an old burn spell from the original Kamigawa. Anyway, the Sokenson Saga in play here. So the next creature that Max plays this turn will actually be significantly larger if he's got one. It'd be a shame to waste those counters, but if he
Yeah,
doesn't have
there's
a
no way you
creature, he
can
doesn't
waste these
have one.
counters, right?
So
But looks like we are. Wow. But I think one of the first one to flip next turn is going to get the counter from the other one, assuming you
yeah.
stack the triggers correctly. And I mean, we see quite a contrast from what we're looking at in the modern seat, where we see 2 4-color decks. We have 2 monocolored decks here in kind of an asymmetrical battle. When you talk about the Pioneer format, fetch lands banned. A lot of the other powerful stuff that's going on in the format involves either delve spells or 1-mana creatures. So this matchup here, kind of very much about the 1 mana creatures. We've seen those managed very well. You alluded to Nykthos, also one of the big ways to make mana, as we see 2 of them among the Oath and Nissa 3-card stack here. What do you think of this matchup as a whole? So we've seen in this game so far, we do know that Nate is up a game. In this game we've seen so far, Max has been able to dispose of the early creatures and then put some pressure on the table. That seems like a winning formula against mono green, if I had to take a guess. Where do you think mono green really gets a lot of their points back?
Well, okay, so first, so Max isn't up a game. We're in game 3 here. To start with.
Oh, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. My apologies.
But yeah, no, I think Max gets a lot of Max's advantage here. Comes from the fact that Nate's payoff spells cost 4 or more mana, and if the mana ramping comes from creatures, Max is able to set that back. So I think we saw a game yesterday. There was a couple lands and a couple elves, and the elves die, and then the green player doesn't do anything. So you certainly slow them down, and then just I mean, it's a pure race. If this game goes to turn 7, I think green's probably just miles ahead.
So
But
in this game here, we see the rampings kind of coming from a Wolf Willowhaven and a Kiora.
Right.
So maybe that's the kind of draw that the green deck is actually looking for in the red matchup. If you want to try to burn down this Kiora, that's 7 loyalty. That's a lot of spells.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Wolf Willowhaven, you can't even target with your spells, as here comes the first of many flipped sagas. Kumano faces Kakazan.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to go with Kumano Saga is what we're going to call this from this on. I'm not going to try to say that every single time. And I believe the backside of this card, in addition to making creatures that are dealt damage by you be exiled when they die, it also has haste. So very relevant. When it gets exiled, comes back. This card being able to attack the turn it comes back, have 4 damage that Max has access to this turn.
How is it that red has legendary personalities, Sokenzan and Kakazan? I mean, that's just 2. Maybe they're brothers or something, or cousins. I don't know. But
there's a lot of various different legends that were available in the original Kamigawa, and I believe many of the sagas are attempts to call back to those. So unless you're well versed in your Kamigawa mono red legends, I think you may not be up to date on the lore. As here is a Bone Crusher Giant. Remember, you have to cast the creatures in order to get that counter. So the Bone Crusher Giant, the first creature cast for Max will enter as a 5/4.
All right, so 3 devotion in play at the moment. That's not actually enough to net anything from Nykthos. I believe he just plays even at this point. So if Nate
even having a 1-mana card here does threaten with Kiora to make quite a bit of mana off Nykthos. So we are kind of at that threshold where every single pip matters. As here comes quite a few pips in form of Old Growth Troll.
Yeah, exactly. So a card nets off Kiora, and now Kiora can untap the Wolf Hollow land, and this now
and activate Nykthos. Wow, that's
6.
a lot of mana.
Yeah,
and Cavalier of Thorns, that's a lot of toughness. And I think these are probably 2 of your better cards in the matchup. We're going to go ahead and draw a card of Kiora as well. Kiora's ability giving a little bit of card advantage here as we reveal the top 5, looking for a land to put onto the battlefield. Looks like forest among many other forests and a couple elves and stuff. Going to hit, going to provide Nate with a little bit of ramp, but most importantly, a 4/4 body and a 5/6 body. Now, Uncle Troll, when it dies, does offer the ability to enchant a land, which makes more mana, and then you can turn that into another creature. These flipped Kumano enchantments do exile Ogre Troll if it does get burnt out, so not quite as much of a blowout if that card does go to the graveyard, but still a very impressive defense in 1 turn from the mono green deck.
Yeah, I think that's putting it lightly. Yeah, the Cavalier of Thorns also has a death ability, which would be shut down, but yeah, Max has got quite a bit of work to do here, as now the board is gummed up. He's just going to go all in, get as much damage across as he can.
This is called Math is for Blockers, Joe.
Yeah, exactly.
This is called the Math is for Blockers special.
Well, this is going to be a
massacre.
Just
fire up that den and crunch.
Yeah, Max is going to lose most of his board here. However, he will get through a decent amount of damage, and then it's just up to burn spells plus utility lands to finish things up. So
here we go. It looks like we're going to Old Growth on the den. Cavalier going to take care of the Bone Crusher Giant. Does send 7 points through. Does put Nate in a pretty precarious position if he elects not to block with this Elvish Mystic.
Yeah, it's
7
a lot.
points is a lot. And with the Ramunap Runes in play, there's a potential to be burned out from even a modestly high life total.
Yeah, this elf not blocking here would be a real sign of confidence in my eyes from Nate Muhlbach, but we'll see. He's debating. He's getting some other thoughts from his teammates here.
Let's see. Let's take a look at the hand. Maybe is that a Pelucranos among other cards? That'd provide a nice additional defense in the following turn, and provided you can keep all your pips around, can also threaten to just actually wrath the rest of the board, leaving Max only really able to finish the game with burn spells. And Pelucranos being monstrous, all that stuff would be a lot of extra damage. Either way, there's still a lot of power in play for Nate. I'm assuming he gets to keep all of his creatures. Cavalier 5 power, Olgotro 4 power, 10 power on board, 2-turn clock. So this game really looking to be over fairly quickly from this point.
2-turn
Nate
clock,
has potential
though.
for a big turn here.
Maybe a 2-turn clock, but Nate's not going to get 2 attacks. Like, he can't swing out and do half damage and then survive. So there's got to be.
We got a lot of mana we have access to. Kiora threatening to double up on those Nykthos activations.
Yeah.
Nykthos making 1, 2, plus 3, 5, plus 3 more, 8, plus 1 more, 9? Looks like the answer was 10. Oh, Miss Wolfalo Haven, 10. 10 mana. Let's go ahead and untap that Nykthos. Let's run that one back. How do you like 18 mana, Joe? Is that enough mana? Or what are we doing here?
We'll see. I mean, it needs to be enough. Max is at 20, so
all right, let's see what Nate can produce. I see Karn among the mix. Don't know if there's any cards that gain life or do a lot to answer the battlefield this turn in Nate's sideboard options. As here comes a Karn the Great Creator.
Okay. Well, that opens up
very quickly downtick that one.
A fairly serious wish board here. Finding Shadow
Spear. How about that one?
Okay.
That one gains life.
It does. That's and we have a lot more mana to use here. I mean, that's only
that we do. We still have access to 14 mana. I think we have enough to play and activate that one. As here comes Shadow Spear. Probably going to put that one on the biggest creature possible. Do want to gain your large amounts of life. And then, of course, can move it afterwards to block with lifelink as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another 5 or so mana for...
4 mana for Pelucranos.
Yeah.
Now, Joe, I have a question. If we move the Shadow Spear to Pelucranos and then fight a lot of things, does that do the damage? Does that gain the life?
I believe it would. Let me check on Pelucranos real quick, but I believe it does fight the creatures. Maybe it just shoots them, but let's see. Here we go. Pelucranos.
Here we go. Becomes monstrous. Deals X damage divided. It deals X damage divided as you choose many target creatures. Each of those creatures deals damage equal to its power. So it only does the damage you put into X. Probably not worth the damage right now. Can always do that if there's another turn, but not really looking like Max is going to do more than take a draw set. Max doesn't even want to play the rest of it. We're good. I'm good. All right. You gained 1 million life. I get it. I get the joke. Good game. We're done here.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back to Modern then. We are either in or heading to game 3. All right. So all those Planeswalkers led to Matt Carlson winning game 2. And this is going to be the decider. Matt Carlson versus Andrew Elenbogen, game 3 of Modern. Yesterday we saw a game 3 in Pioneer in round 7 that if you don't know the result of, you should go watch. It was really pretty exciting stuff as far as squeezing into the top 8. And now we'll see who's going to the finals based on the outcome of this Modern game 3.
We did speak to them yesterday, and Andrew, of course, looking to qualify for the end of the year NRG championship. And what a way to do it at the very end of the season. The biggest NRG to date, a lot on the line for these players, in addition to the cash and of course a trophy. We have, 2 qualifications for the NRG championship up for grabs, as Elenbogen does take care of the Teferi and swing in with an Ice Fang Quaddle.
Yeah, Ice Fang Quaddle. 1 damage, not going to amount to much, but yeah, certainly getting Teferi off the board. Nice. And now Matt Carlson. Looks like there's an Omnath, an Eldarmy's Call, and Abundant Growth. What is the follow-up?
Looks like maybe just a little modest Abundant Growth. Going to go ahead and cycle. Now, Elenbogen has a Boseiju who endures in play. Does that potentially suggest that Elenbogen not necessarily flushed with lands in hand? I feel like that's one of those you want to hold as long as possible.
I agree with you there, and I'm not sure that Matt Carlson has lands either.
Yeah, as
There's
here
no
comes a Fury pitching what looks to be Obsidian Charmaw with a little bit of Ephemerate action.
okay.
Going to take care of the Ice Fang Quaddle and
Yeah.
going to get to keep the Fury around for your trouble. Maybe with both players missing land drops, Matt kind of deciding to be on the aggressive here. And with the Ephemerate being in exile, I think anything that Elenbogen plays is more or less guaranteed to take 4 damage on the next turn, unless Elenbogen chooses to interact in some way. But you do need to plan for that, no matter what your plan actually is. Misty Rainforest looks to be a good draw here, given that Matt was, I think, banking on both players missing on land drops for a while in order to actually enable the aggressive plan with Fury to work. Choosing not to flicker, that way you can get the attack in, seems like it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we'll see if this works against the hammer decks in the previous iteration of Modern. Fury was a sizable threat here against the 4-color decks where there is more removal. I mean, Lightning Bolt is obviously the most embarrassing way to just have it picked off for 1 mana, but not one is not present. And 6 damage comes across. Andrew back to 11, down to 11, and Matt Carlson without a land still.
And here's an endurance, maybe on end step. Go ahead and shuffle that Eldamari's call back in. An interesting one, assuming the damage has already happened. It is a pretty good blocker for Fury. It looks like
Yeah.
maybe Elenbogen actually looking to try to race in some capacity.
Perhaps I think there's another endurance in hand, so maybe it's just I'll get one on the board to attack with, and then the second one can handle the Fury.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Pretty heads up there. I feel like a lot of players would flash that one in, try to block, and just kind of keep the board clear and keep treading water. Maybe Elenbogen kind of pivoting on roll here, saying, "Okay, you're willing to go down quite a few cards. There was 3 cards involved in just killing an Ice Fang Quaddle in order to try to get aggressive. Well, I'm going to try to swing back. I'm going to try to participate in that way because I got creatures too."
Yeah. I believe there is
There's land number
Quaddle.
5.
Okay, so no swing in. There's Quaddle and Elderman's Call in Matt's hand here. I'm a little surprised we didn't see Quaddle main phase to try and hit the land drop. But no, okay, it's an endurance back for Matt's side. All right, that makes sense.
Endurance being a 3/4 are going to do a lot to clog up this board, but I think that's actually pretty bad for Matt. If Andrew's the one making land drops, then clogging up the board and slowing things down seems to be basically exactly what Matt doesn't want to happen. Matt wants Andrew to die as fast as possible, but Ephemerate, a pretty good draw if your plan is to kill this endurance. Going to go ahead and get in with both attackers. Going to see how Andrew acts, if at all.
Well,
If Andrew flashes in this endurance and blocks, there's some really neat tricks available with
yeah,
Ephemerate
this
after
could
first
go.
strike damage.
Yeah, this could go very poorly for Mr. Ellenbogen here.
Now, we do know Elenbogen does have access to a counterspell in hand, but either way, I think Matt's going to be pretty enticed to cast this Ephemerate. Looks like we are going to. Looks like, I assume this is after first strike damage.
Right.
Elenbogen says absolutely not. Very quickly going to fetch, go grab a land, and try to get a counterspell going on that card, I believe.
Yeah, so
Can't let that one happen.
If this Ephemerate would resolve, Fury would blink, come back in, and then shoot and be able to help pick off both endurance. So yeah, Andrew not going to tolerate that counter spell on Ephemerate. So instead, if Matt has nothing else, then Fury and endurance will trade. Their 2 endurances will bounce off of each other. Andrew down to 9, but won't take any further damage this turn.
Correct. And not a great trade for Matt overall, but if there is something like an expressive iteration follow-up, and it looks like we're still before damage going to Eladamri's call, what are we grabbing here? A Solitude?
I think it almost has to be, which is going to put Matt way down on resources, but trying to just finish the game off here, I guess the play probably has to be to preserve the Fury.
Yeah, I mean, if your plan is, I mean, we committed so many cards in order to make this Fury happen to begin with. We pitched Obsidian Charmal, we ephemerated it just to take care of a single Ice Fang Quaddle. If you're all in on the aggressive plan, I mean, this does make sense, but I mean, you're hemorrhaging cards, and this endurance gets to even stay around. So, I mean, a tough spot for Matt for sure, as we know Elenbogen's going to be able to untap, have expressive iteration, prismatic ending, a fantastic draw in order to take care of the other endurance and stifle some of the aggression from Matt's side.
Yeah, and this is going to leave Matt without even an obvious attack here, as Andrew sets up a capable walker and endurance. And yeah, Matt is now pitch cast a couple times, and at least finds a playable card in Risen Reef.
Risen Reef, yeah, very castable. Could find a land, maybe start to catch up on some of the card advantage and land resources. And as a result, Elenbogen respects that. Counterspell that one. No, thank you. All right. Are you attacking this Fury into my endurance? What you got? Absolutely not. Weren't interested in trading before. Why would you be interested now? Solitude, fantastic draw for Andrew as far as stifling aggression goes. And Matt, I think more or less a victim of, kind of not drawing the lands he needed to cast his powerful spells for their card advantage rates, right? Like you stuck pitch casting everything and no expressive iterations for Matt. Multiple copies, it looks like, for Andrew at this point. Going to go ahead and exile Teferi. Looks like put expressive iteration, I guess, in hand. And, Andrew, of course, the wealth of resources, more or less bought out by drawing lands off the top when they were both kind of stuck, as Fury going to go back to hand and Endurance going to come across the red zone. Andrew on the attack now.
Yeah, iteration. I think Andrew is hoping for a land there to make the 5th land post iteration, so actually the 7th land, and then be able to hard cast that Solitude in hand. Instead finds Teferi and bounces the Fury, so that clears the board either way. And as we know, Matt's not in the business of actually casting creatures for their mana cost, so that Fury might be stuck in hand for a while. Endurance gets picked off, but the tides are definitely leaning in favor of Andrew Elenbogen and his teammates McVety and Spicklemire.
Yeah, Andrew ahead on all metrics except life total. Has, lands, a planeswalker, more cards in hand with more to come. Like I said, I think we saw an expressive iteration put in hand as well. Both players do still have access to their companions, but of course only one of them can actually cast it. So Andrew very firmly ahead. We'll see if he can keep his advantage and close the game off and win the decider here for his team in the semifinals.
Okay.
Very quickly going to snap off this expressive iteration. Always a good place to start your turn. Ren and 6 and Omnath among the bunch. Hard not to be interested in at least one of those. Fetch land already in hand. I'll take that Omnath, thank you. That's a lot of mana.
Yes,
I'll take the Ren too, why not?
So land probably going to the bottom. Don't need that anymore. Here's Omnath. Here is the business. All protected by Teferi Time Raveler. Matt Carlson can just sit back and watch.
And what a brutal game for Matt. Once again, committed a lot of resources to an aggressive game plan, saying, all right, look, we're both stuck on lands. I have the ability to get very aggressive, be the first one to get a very respectable threat into play and close the game in 3 turns, but hopefully before you draw out. Andrew, of course, drew some lands, was able to cast all of his powerful spells, and is now firmly in the driver's seat. Going to go ahead and buy Yorion with all that extra mana. Cast Ice Fang Quaddle, pass the turn back, and a land off the top from Matt. We'll see if it's
what he's asking for.
Joe, I think that's one of those on time moments. One of those, sure. You could have been a few cards earlier. That wouldn't have hurt a lot.
Granted, it's probably about turn 8 right now, but Matt can start chaining Omnaths or something. Trying to figure out what to do here.
Looks like Fury among the options. Could Fury pitch cast the Omnath? But once again, that's just hemorrhaging more cards. Ice Fang Quaddle does stymie the aggression potentially from Andrew Elenbogen, but I don't think the game's really overly about getting aggressive at this stage. And once again, we've kind of pivoted to it being more about card advantage and resources, of which Andrew has a embarrassment, I would say.
Yes, indeed. Matt Carlson going to commit planes to the board and does have a choice of follow-ups here. It looks like it's going to be Quaddle, which does not currently have Death Touch.
Abundant Growth going to enable that planes to be a little bit better of a land. Tap for some additional colors. Abundant Growth going to enter, draw a card. Another land picked off. But once again, all these land drops may look to be too little too late as Andrew untaps all of his mana. Omnath still in play. Planeswalker still in play. And we'll see if Andrew can turn the corner this game and keep Matt from clawing his way back in now that he's hitting land drops.
All right, let's see. Omnath swings across. Yeah, that was Andrew checking to see
Snow permanent Matt count. Does that have Death Touch? No? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that's out of here. Andrew gained some life. That's not too relevant right now. Padding it is nice, but the mana boost is what's significant. With Eldarmer's Call, Andrew can do whatever he wants right here. This is the point where, if you have like Emrakul, in your sideboard, which I don't think we do, but would be Andrew can cast anything he wants here. Here is
I mean, they often do have
Yeah, I
Emrakul in
know
their
they sometimes
sideboard.
have it. We'll
It is
see.
possible there's an Emrakul Promise End. It looks like
Yeah.
Eternal Witness, the better target.
Yeah, let's go ahead and check. Wonder if Elenbogen
There's a good chance, and I do think you should bring it in here, right? Like if there's a
Yeah.
spot for it, the matchup where you're
He
just
does
raking a
have
bunch of
one.
land drops. Yeah, there's probably one
Yeah,
in
he
the
does
deck.
have one.
We're going to pick up Counterspell, though. This is probably a little bit better for a little more conservative, at least for sealing the game off. Going to go ahead and get Eternal Witness, which represents another body in play to get aggressive, as well as a Counterspell. As here comes Ren and 6. Of course, this powerful Planeswalker can pick up channel lands, fetch lands, keep the mana flood going, can keep the channel lands as spells, and really just offer to draw kind of whatever card you want. You want a land? We got that. You want a spell? Oh, we can do that too. Ren does it all in this deck.
It does indeed. And 7 power on the board right now for Andrew, looking to get this game over with fairly soon. Maybe not next turn. All out attack plus an Omnath level 3 trigger would do it, but I don't know that that is likely. But Matt Carlson's like, yeah, I cannot fight against this. I needed 2 more land 5 turns ago, and it just wasn't there. So McVety, Elenbogen, and Spicklemire will advance to the finals. All right.
Impressive run for this team, but we've seen be a dominant force on the NRG series all season long.
Yeah.
And, Max McVety, Andrew Elenbogen, both high-ranking players on our leaderboard. We can take a look at that here in a moment, but this is a big weekend for them either way. We do know that a pile of points coming their way, and this is before the Modern event that we're going to be watching later on today, which more points are available there. 2 spots at the NRG Championship up for grabs. A lot on the line this weekend.